Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jason with Jadren Aquatics. Thanks for hanging out with me again. So we are on part 3 of the DIY do-it-yourself fish room. How to do everything that you need to do to get your fish room up and going, whether it's 3 tanks or it's 300 tanks. The very first video that we did, I'll link that above. You don't want to miss that one. That one we went down and we broke down kind of a little bit of everything, but one of the most important things that we talked about is electricity and the consumption of it, and the consumption of water, and understanding, you know, what are the real costs that are involved when starting a fish room, because it's not just spending $10 on getting a tank at Petco. There's so much more that goes into that tank. And then the second video that we did an automatic drip system, how to do an automatic water change. This is something, to me, you just absolutely have to have, especially me, because I just, if I'm having to do water changes, I'm gonna lose interest in a hurry, because then it becomes a job. So I'll link that video above. You don't want to miss that one. Also, today we are going to talk about how to set up an air system, how to drive air to every single one of your tanks. Again, this fish room is, we're trying to make it efficient, and we're trying to keep the cost down, and the best way to do that is to run sponge filters in all your tanks instead of trying to run hang-on backs, because again, you're having to deal with a tremendous amount of energy usage when you're running something like hang on the back. So again, this is based upon running sponge filters or running matten filters, because they still hook up the exact same. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing started. All right, the very first thing that we want to talk about is going to be the heart of your air system, and that is the pump that you choose to use. The pump that I currently use, as you see here, is an LPH 60. These guys are from Gemco. These are linear piston pumps. Now, so that you understand, these pumps are on the more expensive side, but there's multiple reasons why they're more expensive. For one reason, these things are almost silent when they're running, which is not that big a deal to me. I like white noise, but the biggest thing about these things is the amount of energy that they consume based upon the amount of tanks that they can handle. Now, each one of these can handle about 50 air stones. Now, you have to take in consideration that's really an air stone that is in a sponge filter that's in a 10-gallon aquarium, one that's not terribly deep. Now, if you're talking about one that's in a 55 or say a 40-gallon breeder, that sponge sets deeper in it, so it takes more pressure. So if it's in a 40-gallon breeder, that one sponge filter really counts as 2 sponge filters. If you guys are enjoying this video and you would love to see more fish room tours, more fish store tours, and a bunch of cool DIY projects in my amazing fish room, be sure and hit that subscribe button right now. Now, there's a lot of other different types of pumps that are out there, but again, they're going to be noisy. They are going to be a little bit cheaper, but I promise you, if you'll take the time and you'll figure out what the wattage is on these things, and you figure out running this thing 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and you figure out how much electricity it's going to use based upon one of the other pumps that's cheaper, this thing is probably going to pay for itself probably within a year. And whenever you're choosing this pump, the best thing to do is to get one that's bigger than what you actually plan on doing, because it's a whole lot easier to just slough off some of the extra air. I'll show you how I do that in just a little while. But then you have the ability to add more and more tanks so easily, instead of having to keep buying a new pump. Now, in reality, when I first did this, I should have bought a bigger pump than this, because now look, I have 2 of them. It works good because in a sense I have one that's backup. If one of them goes down, then I've got another one. But so that you know, one of these pumps is 3 years old, one of them's 2 years old. I've never had any problems with them whatsoever. All right, so you'll notice on these pumps, I've got them hooked to this circular system that goes, you know, completely around my fish room. Now, you don't have to do it in a complete circle if you don't want to. It just works easier that way. If you're only running tanks that are all like on, you know, on one row, then you could just run just a straight line and just cap both the ends of it and just leave the pressure built up in just that one one section. But again, if you've got a room and you're thinking you might eventually put fish tanks all the way around it, you might as well run it all the way around. It's really easy to do. And so the way that I've actually got this hooked up, now I use 1¼ inch PVC pipe, and I would suggest on all the places where you're connecting it with the elbows and then right here with the T's, that you go ahead and glue it. These things are not on a tremendous amount of pressure, but the last thing you want is one of these things actually blowing apart and all of your air stopping. I've never had mine blow apart, but one of the things I did have is I had a electrical thing I had hanging from the ceiling that actually fell, and when it fell, it hit one of these connections really hard, and it broke it apart just a little bit, and it let enough air escape so that none of my tanks were getting any air whatsoever. Luckily, I discovered it pretty quickly and it didn't cause any damage. But again, it's much better if you go ahead and glue these things together. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's talk about how you're going to get your PVC pipe set up. Now, again, I would suggest that you use 1¼ inch or something bigger than that. 1¼ inch seems to work really well for me. But when you buy this stuff, if you don't know, PVC pipe comes in different schedules, and those schedules have to do with the thickness of the PVC. As you can see on these two right here, you'll see that this is a thin wall, and then that this is a thick wall. I would suggest when you buy the 1¼ inch, you get the thick wall. It has nothing to do with need for more pressure, because that's the reason these are made this way, is to handle more pressure. The reason that you want the thicker one is that when you're using these air valves like this, you're going to have to drill a hole to put these in, and this gives you the ability to have a thicker area to be able to tap that in. If you're using those thin ones, it can be difficult to get these things screwed in good so that it seals good and so you don't have any air leakage. Now, again, these are also ones that come from Gemco. These actually have a self-threading into them, so all you have to do is drill a hole. So whenever you buy these from Gemco, you just simply ask them what size drill bit you need. I think they'll sell you one for a couple of dollars, so that you're getting the exact size drill bit. You don't want to try to guess at this. And so this is the drill bit that I actually got from Gemco. And so the simple way that this thing works is you would just take, now again, this isn't the right size PVC pipe, I'm just using it as an example. Again, I use 1¼ inch. So you're just taking it and you're drilling a hole through it like that. As you can see, it just makes a real small, really clean hole. And then what you do is you pop that off, and then you take the air piece right here, and you want to open it up like this so that it's turned sideways, and then you're going to actually put this into your chuck like this. You slide it into the chuck just like this, and then tighten it down a little bit so that you can use it like this. And then this is the way, again, this is a self-threading one, so this is going to cut out the threads as it's actually going in here. So you simply just kind of put it into that hole like that, and you want to make sure that you're using a drill that you can go slow, because you don't want this thing to get going too fast. And then you just slowly start turning this thing on, and you can feel it starting to tighten up. And once it's got through all the threads, you can stop like that, release it, and now it's done. And so now it's tapped in there nice and tightly. You don't have to use really any thread tape or sealant or anything else. This thing does a really good job of sealing itself off. And so now you've got the ability to put your hose on there, and this is simply, again, just the way to turn it on and to turn it off. But that's the best way to put these things on there, and it's very fast. There's other different ways that you can do this, where you can use like gang valves and stuff, but I found this way is a lot easier to deal with. All right, so as you look up here, You can see how I have all of these tapped in, just like I showed you, with the air line going down. The only thing about this is whenever you put this line, or you put this PVC pipe up here, you want to keep this thing up as high as it can go. And you also, if you look on the side of the pump, it tells you to keep that pump above your water line. That's just so that no way water can ever drip down and get into that pump. So again, keep this thing high, but the problem that you can run into is I can't reach up here and actually adjust these things. I have to get some type of stool. So some people will take these things and just put one of these, and then they'll bring them down to somewhere around here, and they'll run about 10 or 15 gang valves to it. That way they can control all of them from here, and they only have one that actually goes up in there. Doing it with these gang valves costs more, because those gang valves, when you buy those things together, cost more than just buying these separately. So this is the way that I chose to do it. Again, it's only about a foot out of reach, so it doesn't take much to actually get to it. So we talked about before the idea of buying a pump that is bigger than you actually need. So let's say you buy one that's based upon running 50 air stones and you've only got 25 air stones. Well, you're gonna have to relieve some of the pressure that comes off of that. You don't want to keep that thing running fully pressurized in your PVC pipe, because you'll end up running your pump. So what you need to do is you've got to create a release valve. So that's what I have here. I don't have to reuse my release valve anymore, because I have plenty tanks going. Because if I take this release valve and I release any of the air from it, then some of my tanks are not going to have enough pressure to get the air that they need. And as you can see, this is just a really simple way of doing this. We've just got the T up here at the top. You've got a ball valve here. What size you want to make this really doesn't matter. I just happen to have 3/4 inch, so I had to use a 1.25 T to 3/4. You could use 1/2 inch or whatever. It doesn't really matter which one you use. You just want to have the ability. But just so that you know, the way that I used to have this is this piece right here actually used to was turned this way, and then I had a wall here, and this piece went out the wall. The reason is because sometimes this thing can get kind of noisy whenever it's releasing air. So again, right now it's completely closed, but let's say, okay, so there I have it open, and so you can hear there's a lot of air pouring out of here. You can create other devices that go on the end of this that dampen this so that it's not so loud, but that's the reason that I had it like that. So I had the wall right here. This went out of the wall and wasn't as noisy as you hear it right now. But again, that's a critical piece you're gonna need to have on there to make sure that you release some of the pressure that you've got building up in there. All right, so once you get all that hooked together, then you run your hose. You take your hose, you run it down to your sponge filters like you see here. Get those things adjusted so that it's not just barreling out a ton of air out of them. You just kind of want to put it to whatever you feel like you want your settings to be. I used air stones from Gemco in all of mine because it makes for a thinner bubble, and it makes them a lot quieter. If you don't run them with those things can get pretty loud. So if you guys got any questions or comments, be sure and leave them down below. Really appreciate each and every one of you guys. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. I know a lot of crazy stuff is happening in the world right now. So thanks again, guys, and God bless.